Welcome back, drawing buddies. Today we're drawing Superman versus Thor. We're going from pencils to inks to colors, and we're also going to talk about whatever Superman and Thor knowledge pops into my brain. If that sounds good to you, let's draw. So this one was originally just going to be Superman doing some cool Superman flying stuff, but because the movie's coming out the same day this video is released. Then I saw a thing on Reddit about, different superheroes versus others, and the Thor Superman thing came up, and if you've listened to any other video I made, Superman always wins. I mean, unless we're putting him up against the One Above All or the Presence or something like that. And even then, they'd probably find a way to have Superman win. That's just who he is. Because I guess the current Thor, who I know nothing about, has the Odin force of like more than just Odin, the All-Fathers and stuff, more than just Odin, and he's supposed to be like ridiculously powerful himself, but he's not Superman. But anyway, we'll get back to that later. So Superman's first appearance was in Action Comics #1 from 1938. Superman is the first real superhero. He's the one who started it all. He's the one who put on the cape and the tights and the boots and ushered in the whole era of superheroes. Before him, there were pulp characters. There was the Shadow. He had superpowers. There was the Phantom. There was Doc Savage, the Man of Bronze. There was Tarzan. I guess he would technically be considered a pulp hero. But Superman was the first real superhero. And that happened back in 1938. He was created by Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel. A couple kids from New York. Took a couple times to try to get their book published, and finally it caught on. I guess there's a pre-Superman where Superman was a villain. And I forgot what it was called, but it was something they published themselves and put together, almost like a fanzine would have been in the 60s and 70s. But they finally sold it to DC, and they got ripped off really good. We'll talk about that later. Thor's first appearance was in Journey into Mystery number 83. That came out in 1962, so what's that, 24 years after Superman? Because at the time, 1961, Marvel published Fantastic Four #1, and that got them back into the superhero game after a long time of not publishing superheroes. Before that, they had what's called the pre-code monster books and romance books and things like that, like Tales of Suspense, where Iron Man's first appearance was. Before that, it was like giant monsters like Magog and Goog, and it was just Jack Kirby doing crazy stuff. And they're on these giant monster books or giant alien invasions, and I've had a few, and they're definitely interesting, and they are definitely cool. So if you ever get a chance to read any of those or to pick up a graphic novel that has some of that stuff in it, I would highly recommend it. But after the success of the Fantastic Four and Stan and Steve Ditko's Gamble's Spider-Man, they started to introduce more heroes, like Tales of Suspense, which I just said they introduced Iron Man, and Journey into Mystery, which was a book that, mysteries and giant aliens and horror stories, same thing. They decided to introduce Thor, the god of thunder, take a little Norse mythology and turn it into a superhero. Then I think the next issue is the first appearance of Jane Foster, and then Loki, and then God, then Odin, and then eventually in issue 126, they changed it into Thor's own title, because back in the 60s they didn't just cancel it and relaunch it #1 every 10 issues. They just picked up the legacy numbering. So Thor #1 started where Thor started where Journey into Mystery ended, so there is no #1. It's 126. Whereas Superman started in Action Comics #1, and I believe he was the first superhero to get his own title. So Superman #1 was the first solo issue for a single superhero. As far as I know, if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. So way back in 1938, Superman was a different character. He wasn't the overpowered, pretty much god among men that he is now. He was just strong and fast and invulnerable to bullets. Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. That was pretty much what Superman did. In fact, I would say the original Superman was more of just the Hulk, but he had regular human intelligence. He didn't fly, he jumped, he was able to leap tall buildings, so he just jumped, a quarter of a mile, I think, at a time, eighth of a mile at a time. He ran really fast, he was bulletproof, and he could pick up cars and bend steel with his bare hands. Nothing too over the top. They explained his powers, saying that the planet that he came from had a denser gravity, I believe, So he was just naturally stronger due to the environment that his ancestors came from. And they compare it like to the ability of an ant being able to lift up like 100 times its own body weight. And they like showed little baby Superman picking up his crib and stuff in his original origin. And they explained it more of a natural phenomenon. He wasn't like a solar battery who absorbed all the sunlight and gained pretty much any power that he needs under the sun to defeat whatever opponent he has to defeat or save the world from any threat that comes its way, or the universe for that matter. He was just a really strong guy who ran and jumped. He got the ability to fly in the Fleischer cartoons in the 1940s. I forgot when they started, but they just remastered those. So if you want to see something really awesome, go back and check out the early Joel Fleischer's cartoons from the 1940s. In those, for some reason, they decided to be easier to make him fly. So that's where he got his powers of flight. In fact, a lot of Superman's powers and abilities didn't come from the comics. They came from outside media. Like Kryptonite was introduced in a radio short because Superman was so popular. They had radio stories. They had films before movies. They had the cartoons before movies. He was the first superhero of playing cards, which I had a few of those. Those were really cool. We'll talk about those too. And he had toys. He branched out. There was nothing like him before. He was selling millions of copies a month. It was a phenomenon. This video, more than the other ones, it almost feels like a stream of consciousness just because I have so much pent-up Superman knowledge that it's just coming out like vomit, and there's no real flow to it, so I'm sorry about that, but it's probably going to go on for the next hour, so get used to it. Thor, on the other hand, I don't know nearly as much about, because back when I was reading comic books, Thor was very uncool. He was definitely C grade, maybe low B. The Avengers weren't cool. Iron Man wasn't cool. Captain America wasn't cool. It was for Marvel. It was Spider-Man and the X-Men, and that was pretty much it, really. Even my boy Daredevil wasn't that popular. I think I mentioned this in one of the other videos. But one thing about Thor, though, is I stopped buying comic books for a long time. And I would go to the flea market every weekend with some friends, and I would see comic books, and I would just ignore them. You know, I just didn't want to get into that again for whatever reason. There's no good reason. I wasn't mad. They weren't something that I was turned off to. I just stopped buying them for a while. And one day when I was at the flea market, I just happened to see a box on a table, and they were Silver Age. So I started to look through the box, and there was like a lot of really cool stuff in there. There was some old Green Lanterns, some old Batmans. But the one that stood out to me the most in that box was Thor number 84. It's the second appearance of Thor, and I think it's the first Jane Foster. It has a brown cover, and Thor's on the cover doing Thor stuff. And I saw that box. I'm like, oh wow, that's cool. So I asked the lady, how much is this box of comics? And she wanted like $800 for it, which didn't seem unreasonable to me at the time, and it definitely wasn't. But I was also at a flea market, and I don't normally carry $800 around with me, and normally I don't have $800 to spend on anything. I definitely would have had to borrow some money to buy these things. So, I just said thank you, and I left, and I was mad that I couldn't buy these comics. And I was hoping she'd be there the next week, and she wasn't. But after that, I'm like, if I have been ignoring comic books this long at flea markets and, tag sales and things, what did I not buy? What have I been missing? And turns out I was missing a lot, because after that I started looking again. And I think the next week that lady wasn't there, so I obviously couldn't buy those comics, and I made sure I had $800 with me just in case, even though I probably would have tried to get them for a lot less. In fact, I know who bought that box. I met him later, and apparently he paid $450 for it. So I'm sure I could have done the same thing and got it for close to that. But that week I went looking around, and I'm looking on a table, and I find a guy selling comic books for $1. They were more modern ones that I'm familiar with. And in those dollar comics, I got a first appearance of Gambit, X-Men 266, second appearance of Gambit, sorry. I don't want to make a liar out of myself. First appearance of Carnage, Spider-Man 361. First appearance of Cable, New Mutants 87. He didn't have a 98 though, so I didn't get a Deadpool that day. But just basically a bunch of cool early 90s keys. And then like the week after that, a guy had piles of comic books that looks like he pulled them out of a attic, and most of them were in terrible shape. But those I got a Spider-Man 300, the second Venom, not first Venom, although I did get a 299, so I had first, second Venom. They did have a first Deadpool, a New Mutants 98. And for a while, it was like that every week. I would just find these really cool comic books, and it was like, oh, all the stuff that I don't have anymore from my childhood is coming back to me, and this is great. And it was like that for a while. You know, you go to a flea market, you find a couple books. You go to a tag sale, find a couple books. You go to a comic show, you know, you get to know the vendors, and they know what you like, and they put things aside for you, and they give you good deals sometimes. And so you get books there. And then the pandemic hit, and it all kind of dried up. It's a lot harder to find those tag sale books and those flea market books now, but every now and then it does happen. So the whole point of that tangent is, even though I never read Thor and I was never really into Thor, seeing that Thor number 84 in that box is what got me back into buying comic books. And I think in another video I talked about how I'm not a big fan of the evil Superman trope, and you know, something happening to Lois and Superman loses his mind and gets all evil and stuff. But I realized by the end of this drawing, my Superman's a little angry. I kind of gave him a bit more of the movie Superman look, even though I kept the traditional S and I didn't add all the extra lines to the costume. But I didn't give him an overly large build, and it definitely made him a little angry for some reason. Probably because, you know, he just got in a fight with Thor, and even though it wasn't easy, he still won. Actually, after I put this whole video together, I had the idea of putting a word balloon on Superman, basically saying, "Stay down." You know, big, you know, the spiky word bubble like he's yelling it, because I have some really cool comic fonts, and that would have worked out really well. In fact, right here, he kind of had like a Joker smile, and I thought that was kind of pushing it, so we didn't want that. So I just went for like a angry Superman look. I did leave it a little ambiguous, though, even though Thor is beaten and bloody on the ground and reaching for his hammer. He's not knocked out, so he can still come back and win this fight. So if you're a bigger Thor fan than a Superman fan and you think Thor would have won that fight, then you are welcome to interpret it that way, because I'm okay with it. But Superman definitely would have won. Just saying. So going back to something I said earlier, a lot of things that happened in Superman happened on like his radio show, like Kryptonite, which I said, and I think Lex Luthor first appeared on the radio show. Don't quote me on that, but there are certain parts of his character that were developed outside, like flying came from the cartoons and other things like that. So there was a lawsuit. There were many lawsuits, but the Schuster, I believe it's the Schuster family, might have been the Siegel family too. They're always suing, try to get some of the rights back, because, you know, basically the story is they were robbed. They were paid like $400 for the rights to Superman in perpetuity, which is forever. And so they made very little money off Superman. They just got paid for drawing the books and writing the stories. They didn't get any merchandise money. They didn't get any licensing fees. They didn't get anything like that. And the way the companies worked back then is you did what was called work for hire. And they just basically paid you to do your thing, and you own nothing. You might get a credit for it. Like, they had the credit worked into their contract, you know, like Superman created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, but, you know, they didn't get any money for that. So their family started suing, and around 2009, 2010, they actually won a case saying that DC owned everything. Don't quote me exactly on this, I didn't read the whole thing, but that DC basically keeps, you know, the stuff that happened in the comic books, but the rights to everything that happened in other media revert back to the Schuster family. And I'm pretty sure that's why in 2011 DC rebooted everything, and they had the New 52, and that basically rewrote Superman's origin, basically, and took away a lot of the stuff that the Schusters won the rights to. And I was at New York Comic Con the year those were all published, and me and a friend of mine, we went to the DC panel, which we kind of snuck into because we got down there and the line went all the way down the corridor. And I said, you know, bud, we're going into this DC thing. Is like, we're not getting into that. Look at that line. I said, we are getting in. So basically, when the people started coming out from the panel before that, we walked in the outdoors against the crowd and got in. And they were giving away casino chips. So yeah, I'm that jerk who cuts the line sometimes when the odds are against me, so sorry about that too. But anyway, so they were giving away these Wayne Casino chips, so I went to each door and I'm like, hey, I didn't get any casino chips. Can I have a couple? And they'd give you a couple. They didn't care. So I had all the denominations except for the 100. And to get the 100, the guy in the booth, not the booth, in the room who had the microphone saying, because we were allowed to ask questions, the Q&A part, he's like, to get a $100 chip, you have to ask a really good question. So I leaned over to my friend, and I said, I got a question. What do you think of this one? And I said, what if I ask him how the Schuster lawsuit affected their rights to Superman and how much of it caused the changes made in the New 52? And he looked at me. He said, you better not ask that question, because if I get kicked out of New York Comic Con for life because you asked DC why they can't publish Superman books, I'm going to be very mad at you. So I didn't ask my question, and I didn't get my chip, but I would have loved to ask the question just to hear what the answer was and how they basically would give me a politician's answer for it, because I'm sure that's what would have happened. But that's my fun lawsuit story, I guess, about Superman and Comic-Con, and I didn't get my $100 Wayne Casino chip. But I do have the other ones in a box somewhere I moved, so I don't know where they are. So here I figured out the layout and the look of the characters, the Thor and the Superman, and I got the flow of the piece going. Because if you look, the red cape draws you down to Superman. Superman's looking down, draws you to Thor, and then Thor's looking up at the hammer. Or you can look at the hammer, points you to the cape. So basically, I wish I had this set up so I could show you. But when you're drawing something, you got to think about composition and the flow. Because here we are, we're done with the pencils, and now it's time to ink Superman versus Thor. So yeah, the composition is important too. So you got to think about the flow of your piece. You can't just have random things floating around and flying around. Everything needs to serve basically the story. Even just a pinup drawing has a story, whether it's complicated or not. This one's basically just Superman fought Thor, and at the moment Superman's winning. There's no deeper thing to it, but it flows. Your eye catches one thing and it leads you to another and brings you to another one. Same thing when you're drawing a comic page. You want it to go left to right, just like you read. So your first panel goes to the right and comes to the next one, or from top to bottom. You don't want confusing layouts that jump all over the place. You want to keep it simple. In fact, if you're doing tryout pages and sample pages for Marvel or DC or anybody, don't get fancy. Don't break the panel borders. Don't put things at weird angles. Don't tilt things and get crazy or not have panels. Keep it simple and tell a good story with a good drawing, and that's what they're looking for. Once you're a professional and you got a few books under your belt and you're reliable and they're counting on you, that's when you could get fancy and do cool stuff. Somebody asked a question on the last video about how do you draw on a computer and all this stuff, and how do you get good at using a computer for drawing. And I guess I gave him two answers. One was, if you already know how to draw, it's just a matter of learning the basics of the software you're drawing with, whether it's Photoshop or Clip Studio or Procreate. You just gotta know how to pick the pencil tool, know how to pick the ink tool, the color tools, and how to make layers. And then everything else is just, what you want to do. Like in this drawing, I blurred the smoke a little bit to make it look a little more smoky instead of hard edge like I leave it in some of the other drawings. And, so for that I would have drawn the smoke and the hard edge like I do in the other drawings, and then I'd have to blur it. If I didn't know how to blur it, I would just Google it, how to, blur an image in Photoshop or Procreate or Clip Studio, which I'm using Clip Studio on an iPad to draw these. And, if you don't draw, I would suggest just drawing. Use your iPad, use pencil and paper, and just keep drawing until you think your drawings are good enough. And just, even if they're not, just draw. The more you draw, the better you're going to get at it. It's a skill you can learn. I mean, some people are born to do it easier and faster than others. Like my original drawing buddy, Mr. Sif. When we were kids, he was a much better artist than I was. He was quicker, he was more polished, he was more professional looking. And in some ways, I still think he could be better than me, although he's having problems drawing now that we won't talk about because that's not my place to say. But, yeah, I learned to become good. He was naturally good because I just drew for hours and hours and hours on end when I went to art school. That's all we did. I was drawing for 10, 16 hours a day. There's no way you're not going to get good at something when you're putting in that much time. Even though it's kind of a myth, it's the 10,000 hour rule. You put 10,000 hours into something, you get good at it. And I've also gone through long periods of time where I didn't draw. So it kind of stifled my growth as an illustrator too, because I was too busy dealing with life and stuff. But now I have a little more free time, so I spend a lot more time drawing. So if you notice, once I get the sketches down on these things, the drawings themselves, each one seems to go a little bit faster, because I'm putting in the time and I'm getting a little better each time, a little faster each time. And the same thing would happen for you. You know, your first drawing might not be as cool as you want it to be. The second one might not either, but it'll be a little bit cooler. And they'll just slowly get better, and your skills will slowly develop. And, you know, you pick something that's giving you trouble. You're having trouble drawing eyes? Just sit there and draw eyes for a day. Just keep drawing different eyes in different poses. Like one of my favorite artists, his name is Duncan Raoul. And he draws kind of like a more cartoony style, even more cartoony than I draw. But it's very clean and very polished, even though a lot of the anatomy is wonky and the sides are really wonky. I don't know if people use the word wonky anymore, but it's a term I grew up using, so I'm bringing it back. But one thing that really drew me to his artwork was he was drawing Alpha Flight back in the 90s. I actually picked one of his books up off the newsstand in New Jersey. And I just saw it on the stand. I liked the cover, and I was hooked since. But one of the things that drew me to it, even though he was really cartoony, he made sure each character had a distinct look to him, whether it's the shape of their head or their nose and their eyes. He always made sure each character had a unique eye shape to go with their character. And that's another thing. It's like, oh, because, you know, sometimes I get into a thing, and if I'm drawing somebody mad, I just do triangle eyes. Like Thor over here, he has the triangle eye, but I actually changed that because I think it's too big, even though I kind of like one of those artists who draw the eyes way too big. I've been doing it ever since I started drawing. I've dialed it back a lot. My eyes used to take up like a third of the head. It was crazy. I don't really have any older drawings to show you guys of that because I lost a bunch of stuff moving a bunch of times, but one day maybe I'll just do a thing where I show you guys and I'll draw something like how I used to, and you're like, damn, those are big eyes. But yeah, so change things up. You know, just because you draw an eye one way for one character doesn't mean you have to draw it the same way for another. And yeah, just pick a part of anatomy you're having trouble with. You're having trouble with hands? Take a few pictures of your hand. Try drawing that. If you can't draw it, trace it. But don't just trace it, draw it. Trace the palm. Trace each section of the finger so you could see the shapes that you are building the hand with. In fact, I filmed a video. It's a short one. And I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to do like a quick video on hands. It'll be like 5-10 minutes long. And I'm going to do one on feet and legs and arms and heads and noses. And just basic little cartoony anatomy things. They won't be as clean as polished as some of the ones you see out there. But they'll be simplified and they should be fairly easy to follow. So those will be coming soon. And also when I live stream, which is also coming soon, I finally figured out my audio issues and everything. So that should be coming up within the next month or so. I'm just getting ready for a convention and stuff, so that's slowing me down. But if you come to the live streams and you ask a question about how to do something, you know, I'll probably sit there and go through it quick, and hopefully that'll help you out. And if you don't like the way I'm doing something, you can draw better than I am. I want to see those too, because I love looking at other people's art. So if you are a fellow artist and you draw, and you're listening to this, put a link in the comments if you got some of your stuff online. I'd love to take a look at it. In fact, somebody I know sent me a picture of things called bad drawings, and it was a guy drawing bands, and they were basically glorified stick figures. And I'm looking at that, and I'm like, you know what? They might be stick figures, but they are awesome. And I couldn't do that because I would be trying to put all this crazy detail in or these extra things in the figure, and it just wouldn't make a good stick figure. It would be a bad stick figure. But this guy, his stick figures were perfect and awesome, and, you know, I would like to use something like that on an album cover or something, but I can't draw that. It just, my brain won't let me bring things down to that level, that simplification, and it kind of sucks because I really like the look of it. Also, look at other artists that you like. Like when I was at my old job, I was able to make copies of whatever I wanted if we had time. So during lunch, I would, go online and I would look up artists that I like, and I would save images that I like, comic pages, pinups, covers, whatever I could find, and I would just put them all in a folder with that artist's name. And then when I had enough of them, I would print them out, and then I would take them down to the local Office Max, which isn't there anymore, and pay a few bucks to have it bound, and I'd have a little book full of this artist's work. So, if I ever was drawing something and I couldn't figure something out, or I needed some inspiration, or I just wanted to see how somebody did something, I'd pull out my little binder of Chris Pacello artwork, or my Greg Capullo artwork, or my How to Draw from Wizards, which had a lot of Greg Capullo artwork in it, and things like that. So, look for artists that you like, and keep a folder of their work, and throw it in a PDF or in a folder, and, look at it for inspiration. Copy your favorite drawing. Trace your favorite drawing. These are all different ways to learn new things. A couple days ago, I was working on another drawing, which will be coming up soon. I'm not sure which one will come first, but we won't talk about it. But I had YouTube on in the background, and Trent Kowanigan, I believe that's how you say his name. I apologize. He's a video game illustrator, but when I was growing up, he did a comic book called Creed. And he was like 16 years old. He was actually younger than I was. And he was drawing this awesome little comic about a kid who, I think he controlled dreams or controlled a dreamstone or something. And there was a crossover with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I was buying all his stuff, so... And then, like anything else, he kind of just disappeared, and I found out later in life he went over and started drawing video games and gave up on comics. But he does YouTube videos now, and he talks about things. And one of the things he was talking about was Mike Mignola and studying Mike Mignola's art, the guy who did Hellboy. And I'm a huge fan of Mike Mignola. I've been to a couple of his art shows. One of them was at the Society of Illustrators in New York, which was really cool, because I went there with a couple friends, and we got there early. I think the show started at like 8, and we got there at like 7. So we said, let's go see what's in this gallery anyway. So we go into the gallery, and we look around, and then I asked the lady at the desk, I said, the Mignola show, that starts at 8, right? She's like, oh, yeah, everything's set up upstairs. She's like, if you guys want, you could go up and look now. I mean, there's no reason why you can't. So we're like, yeah, we'll go. And it's a good thing we did, because we had like the whole hallway to ourselves for like 45 minutes, and where all the art was. And it was great. We got to take pictures, relax, and enjoy it all. And then while we were there, somebody else said to us, hey, there's a reception upstairs, and Mike's going to be there. If you want, you can go up there. So we're like, hell yeah, we'll go up there. So we went up there, and there's a room full of people and other artists, and it was like, oh, definitely don't belong here, but it's cool. And, Mignola showed up, and he was signing things for people, and it was really cool. I didn't get anything signed because I didn't bring anything with me, because I didn't think there was a chance in hell I would meet Mike Mignola. So, we just sat there and listened to him talk about things, and some other artists talk about things, and had, some of the food. It was like more of a pasta thing, like a buffet. And that was pretty great. And then when we went back downstairs to get out of the place after it was over, it was packed. You couldn't even move in where the art was, and you could barely see anything because there were so many people there. So getting there early, and the nice lady at the reception desk letting us go up there and look at everything was really cool, because we got a, almost like a private show. It was pretty cool. So, don't be afraid to ask people when you go somewhere. The worst they could do is say no. And then recently, a few months ago, before the winter, so I'd say last fall, me and a friend of mine went down to New York City, and there was a Mike Mignola show at a gallery. And man, I never wish I had a few $1,000s in my pocket more than I did that day, because they had amazing screw-on head sketches that were, we'll say, affordable, but out of my price range. But it was great to see his original work and his watercolors and all that other fun stuff, and talk to the gallery owner about them and stuff like that. So yeah, if you like an artist and they're having a show or something where you can actually see their original art, I would recommend going to it if you have the means, you're close enough and you're able to get there. It's definitely an experience, and it's definitely worth it. But the whole reason I'm going back to Mike Mignola is because he was talking about his composition and his inks and the simplicity of his work. And when I was going to art school, everybody else in my class was trying to be Todd McFarlane or Jim Lee. They were doing small little lines and dashes and cross-hatching. And I wanted to be Frank Miller or Mike Mignola. I wanted to simplify everything, although I draw things really cartoony. That's why you don't see a lot of actual little line work in my drawings, unless it's Spawn's cape or something ridiculous like that. And I use lots of solid blacks in my shading. Not that I anywhere on the level of Mike Mignola, but he inspired me to do things like that. And then with the Trent Kowanigan thing, talking about him, I was thinking about, it's like, I've strayed from that path, and I kind of want to get back to it. And I sketched out like a Frankenstein versus, what's the guy's name? Frankenberry, the cereal guy. yesterday, and I think I might try to Mignola that up a little, even though it's not going to look like Mike Mignola drew it. It'll look like I drew it, but, more simple than normal. Even this is too complex to be a Mike Mignola drawing. So I'm going to try to get back to that a little bit in some of my future drawings, just the way he lays out pages and he draws your eyes to different things, kind of like I said earlier with this one, where the cape draws your Superman down to Thor, to the hammer and back up again. It's a circular thing. And Mike Mignola didn't always draw like he does in Hellboy. He evolved to that style from a more traditional comic style. But when he started getting into the whole Hellboy looking thing before Hellboy, he did a cool book for DC. I think it's called Cosmic Odyssey. And Superman's in that, and a bunch of DC heroes are in that. So if you want to see Mike Mignola do DC heroes and see how he draws regular superheroes sort of in that style, I would recommend the Comic Odyssey. And he also did a really cool Hellboy, Batman, Starman. That's a really cool one. It's mostly Hellboy and Starman. Batman is just in there because I think the editors made him put him in there so they'd actually sell some books. But that's a really great one. He does all 3 or 4 issues of that, and it's kind of like him at his best drawing superheroes, because he was already in the Hellboy phase and he already was pretty much doing things the way that he does it now, except he's drawing Batman and Starman, and it's a really good book. So I would recommend picking that one up too. And I'm already deep into this video, and I realize I haven't talked much about Superman or Thor. It's all tangents, but they all kind of relate to Superman, like the Mignola thing and whatnot. But I like to talk about first appearances. Obviously, I've never had an Action Comics #1, and I've never had a Journey into Mystery 83. But the oldest Superman thing I had was some trading cards from 1940. I started collecting cards during the pandemic, and one of the vendors I buy a lot of stuff off of said, "I have something you'll really like. If it won't be cheap, but if you're interested, I'll bring them." And I'm like, "Yeah, let's see what you got." And what he brought me was some 1940 gum ink Superman cards. So basically in 1940, 2 years after Superman, his first appearance, they put out the first trading card set. Superman's the first superhero to get a trading card set. And I forgot how many cards were in the set. It wasn't the whole set, but it was a good chunk of them. And I bought them, and they were awesome. I sold a few, I kept a few. There were some really weird cards, like it would have Superman fighting a lion or a tiger, or underwater with a shark. And because that's before Superman was doing ridiculous things like destroying galaxies and stuff. And they were really fun. They're cool cards. If you ever see any, just look at. They did reprints a few years ago, so if you want to check them out, that's an affordable way to get them. But they're really cool. The #1 card is worth a lot of money. I mean, you could have one that's almost ripped in half and half the image is missing, and it's still going to cost you like $3,000. He didn't have that one, and I'd probably still be paying it off if he did, because I definitely would have wanted that one. But yeah, it's a really cool set, so if you could ever get some of those. And they also did another variation on those. I forgot what they were in. They weren't packs of cards. And it's the same art, but instead of being full color, it was only 2 colors. They were printed in blue and red on white. So they're very graphic looking and very stylized. I've never seen any of those in the wild or where to get them, but they're on my list of things that I would like to have at least one of. So if you have a line on where I could get a couple of those cards, let me know. And if I could afford them, I might actually buy them. And so the inks are coming along on this. I'm almost done with them, actually. I was going to just cheap out and do some more smoke in the background and clouds and a sun. But like, yeah, this is Superman versus Thor. It deserves to have a few buildings in the background and not cheat out on it. So that's one of the reasons why this one takes almost an hour instead of the last few videos being 30, 40 minutes. I think one was even 26 minutes. Because this one features 2 characters, it features some buildings, features some smoke. But, these are the things that make the drawing better and cool, and it's part of the composition. So I guess another piece of drawing advice is some drawings you could just put a color in the background and a couple lines or dots and stars and call it a day, and some you have to put in the extra time and draw the buildings. So you just got to know which ones will work with which. And this one definitely would not have worked if I just threw a big sun behind them and a blue sky. It would have taken away some of the impact because I put damage on these buildings, so you see the smoke, so you can tell that Thor and Superman were really going at it, and they made a mess of the city. As for Thor, I've never had a Journey into Mystery 83 either. I've had some Journey into Mystery issues, but nothing that was a key or anything crazy. But I do have his rookie card. The first Marvel set of cards was Donruss 1966, and I did get a set of those off the same vendor who sold me the Superman cards, and I also have some loose cards. So I have his rookie card, but I do not have many Thor comics. In fact, I only have a couple issues from the God of Thunder run with Gore and all that stuff. I picked those up somewhere. They came in, I went to look at some comics, and the guy had them, so I picked them up. But I don't have any real Thor keys, or never really had any Thor keys, because he wasn't somebody that I followed, unfortunately. Like Superman, I didn't really read his comics until I was in my late teens, mid-teens. It was my late teens, because it was the death of Superman. That was 1993. When I was reading DC, I would read Green Lantern, and I love the Flash, and I would get and Batman, and I would get random issues, and sometimes I'd pick up a Superman just because I liked the art of the cover, but I never really read them like regularly. And then when the death of Superman happened, there was a video store by my house, and they sold comics, and I didn't even really think much about it. But my uncle came home, who I've talked about in other videos, who would take me out to buy comics on the weekends and take me to movies and stuff. And he came back from going to that video store, and he bought like 3 or 4 copies of The Death of Superman, and he gave them. He's like, "Here, these might be something someday," so I picked them up for you. And so since I had the Death one, I had to go back and get the other ones. So the first real Superman story that I read, other than a few classics here and there, was The Death of Superman. I also read some of the classics like Alan Moore's, what is it called? I don't remember what the story is called, but basically Superman, he's basically in a coma, and he's induced into like an illusion, and it was Mongol, and there's like a flower on his head, and what the hell is it called? But yeah, that's a classic, an Alan Moore issue. I'm going to look that up right now. Pause. Okay, so it was for The Man Who Has Everything. Alan Moore wrote 3 Superman stories. That one, and Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, and I'm not sure what the other one was, because it's not popping up on the quick Google search. But for The Man Who Has Everything one, that was adapted to a Justice League episode, and it was really good. So if you want to read 3 classic Superman stories, just look for the Alan Moore ones. He only wrote 3 Superman stories, and each one of them are considered some of the best Superman stories ever written. So that goes to show you the quality of the work that Alan Moore does. And if you're not sure who he is, he created Watchmen. He did Miracle Man and 3 Superman stories, and they're all considered classics. He's kind of given up on comics now because DC really screwed him over on Watchmen and the rights. The rights to Watchmen were supposed to revert to him after they were done publishing, but they screwed him by never stopping to publish it. The reason why graphic novels started was because they didn't want to give Alan Moore the rights back to the Watchmen characters, so they started printing graphic novels, and they've kept Watchmen in print every year since it came out in, I think, 1986, just so they wouldn't have to give the rights back to Alan Moore, and that pretty much turned him off the comics. Well, really just Marvel and DC, because they screwed him out of those Watchmen rights. He's done stuff for Image, he's done independent books, he's done, what was that book? The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, that was a great one, where they take historical figures and they turn them into superhero teams. The movie's terrible, but the comics are pretty great. So, Alan Moore. So if you want to read some good stuff, anything by Alan Moore, those Superman stories that I mentioned, because Alan Moore and Frank Miller pretty much made comics cool again in the mid-'80s. And they're the reason why adults got into comics at the time, and they were on the New York Times bestseller list, and they really took comics from being something just for kids and made it for everybody. So if you want to know who to thank for that, it's mostly those two. Frank Miller's Superman's a little different, though. He always treats him more as an authoritarian figure, and something that Superman really isn't. A lot of people don't think Frank Miller really understands Superman. Like in The Dark Knight Returns, I mean, he has good intentions because he started working for the government to save other heroes. But at the same time, they treat him more like an authoritarian figure instead of somebody who really wants to help. Like, instead of helping ordinary people and causes around the world, he's basically a stooge for the U.S. government. I mean, they use that in a way where they say he does that because he did it to help all the other heroes in the world, because they were all forced to retire. And so instead of the government rounding them up and putting them all in jail, Superman said that he would work for the government to, keep them clear and keep them out of jail. And that's why it's dangerous for Bruce to come back, because it scares people. And if he does that, then, the government's going to come after him, and they're not just going to stop at him. Even though they implied like that. Hal's off in the stars. I forgot where Flash went. He shows up in Dark Knight too, but that's pretty forgettable and pretty awful. It starts out with a good premise where Bruce wants to, come back and bring the heroes back. And the first issue, he frees the Flash. The Flash was imprisoned. I forgot exactly how they kept him there. He was basically just running in space in the same spot forever, and he couldn't get out. And then he freed Plastic Man, because I don't know how much people know about Plastic Man. But Plastic Man, he's one of the most powerful heroes there is. Even Superman, there's a scene in Injustice where Plastic Man shows up because I think his son or something got captured and put in the superhero prison that Superman set up. And he goes to talk to Superman. He just doesn't want to hear anything of it. And he's very flippant, and he's insulting everybody. And he's like, how do you think that this is better than what we had before? And how do you still think you're the good guys and everything? And Superman pretty much at that point would kill anybody who dared to talk to him like that, but not Plastic Man. They're just like, whatever, and they let him go, because in a room with the Flash, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, and Superman, nobody wanted to fight Plastic Man. And he single-handedly goes down to that raft and saves his son. It's a pretty cool story. I read that on, I think, the DC app. I just looked it up after I saw that thing in Injustice, and need to know what the hell happened there. So if you want to read a few stories, there's a DC app that has a ton of comics in it, and there's also Marvel Unlimited. So if you don't want to go out and buy a bunch of back issues, and you just want to pay like $10 for a month, read a bunch of comics, and then cancel whenever you want, that's what I do. I usually just read what I want to read, cancel it, go about my business, and then if something pops up again, I'm thinking about it, I'll get the app. The last few things I read on there were a Multiple Man limited series, because I really like Multiple Man. I do a video on Multiple Man, but I don't think anybody watch it. In fact, last year, 2 years ago, at the local Comic-Con, Larry Stroman, the guy who did X Factor in the 90s when Jim Lee was doing X-Men and everything, was there, and I bought a sketch off him. I had him draw me Multiple Man, and it was actually kind of scary, because I paid him ahead of time, and it was Saturday, and Sunday was the last day of the show. He's like, oh yeah, I'll bring it tomorrow and it'll be all set. I'm like, all right, cool. And he was nowhere to be seen. I mean, I was going back to his table every hour, and I was getting nervous. Like, did Larry Stroman just screw me out of $100? And finally, he was there. I'm like, oh, cool. I didn't think you were coming back. He's like, oh, I wasn't going to. I was getting ready to go home, and I remember I had a few of these sketches I had to give to people, so I decided to come back down. He asked me if I paid for it already. I said yes, and he remembered, so he gave me my sketch, and I was happy, because I don't know how I would have found Larry Stroman to get the sketch if I didn't. But yeah, and it was weird that he only charged $100, because it's a full 11x17 pen and ink. It's beautiful. I gotta hang it up, actually. I haven't hung it up since I moved. I gotta find a good place for it where it doesn't look out of place. But yeah, for $100, I mean, that sketch, if I had somebody like Chris Pacello do something like that, or any artist of that time, it probably would have cost me at least $600 to $1,000 or more. Sky's the limit on some of those things. I think John Romita Jr. is going to be at the next con, and just for a head sketch, a pencil head sketch, it's $250. So I got an awesome multiple man drawing from Larry Stroman, so I'm really happy about that. And yeah, if you're looking for a good read, his X Factor run's really funny. The first issue has a running gag with everybody trying to open up a jar of mayonnaise, and nobody could get it open, and it's really good. So check it out, Larry Stroman, another great artist to look at, and another artist who is more simplified and less detail orientated than like the Jim Lees and the Walt Portacios and Todd McFarlane's of the time, and that made his work stand out. I don't know if it's coming through the microphone here, but I can hear it through the headphones. Last video I talked about how there were like little puppies barking like crazy, and it sounded like they were in a death match in a cage in somebody's backyard, and roosters and everything. And today is the day after the 4th of July. So I was going to do this last night, but fireworks were going off, and I didn't think it was a good idea. And today, the downstairs neighbors are having a picnic out in the yard, and all I hear is screaming and yelling. So if you hear a little about that through the microphone, I apologize. It looks like every week now I'm apologizing for some random noise. So hopefully things get back to normal soon after all these holidays are done. If you notice in some of my other drawings, I usually have the shading either to the right or the left. And for this one, I thought it would be more menacing to have the shading go down the middle. And plus, I think I saw an anime drawing where somebody did something similar. Like, that looks really cool. I'm gonna try something like that. I haven't done anything like that in a long time. In fact, I put the picture in the corner as motivation for you to watch the whole thing and follow along, so you could see where we're going with this, especially if you're drawing along with me. So, you know, you could pause it and see the final drawing and copy the bits you need. But yeah, so I tried something a little different on the colors, where I did a shading down the middle, and I did highlights too, so it's not just shading down the middle, it's shading and highlights. And I put the rosy cheek thing on Superman and everything to make him look a little more believable. I don't do it to Thor because all the red and the blood on his face, I figure he didn't need the extra blushiness of the flesh tones, but I felt Superman did. In fact, this one, the longest part of this one is the coloring, because there's just so much. There's a lot of red, there's a lot of yellow, there's a lot of blue, there's buildings, there's a sky, there's smoke, there's a hammer. If you notice, you know, if I draw one character, the video is 20 minutes to a half hour, but you know, you start throwing in buildings, you start throwing in multiple characters, things get more complicated and the video goes to an hour or more. Like this one, I think is just over an hour long, and that's at the speed I normally put it at. I could have sped it up more and brought it down, but then I think it's going too fast. If I play it at 100%, it's too slow, and I just think it'll put you to sleep. And I found that 450% seems to be the sweet spot as far as me watching it and not thinking it's boring. So I hope that translates well to you guys watching it too. Like, it's not too fast, it's not too slow, and you get the gist of what's going on in the drawing. And if you do want to follow along, on Wednesdays I put out the same drawing, and I only speed it up like 50% because 100% is way too slow. But 50% speeds it up just enough so that, you know, it doesn't, you don't see me pausing every 3 seconds to flip the screen or move the pencil or change the tool. So if you really want to follow along and draw with me, the Wednesday videos are probably better for that. It's just music though. You don't get to hear me talk and tell all the fun stories. So like the last video, one of my followers who actually watches the full video, he's like, "What is this? There's no talking. I watch these things to hear you talk about the heroes and learn some lore and stuff, and it's not here." And he was watching the video, that the real-time video, the draw-along video, and so I had to send him a link to the other one because he thought I changed my format. And that would have been bad because then I would have lost a follower. But they're steadily starting to increase, so I thank all you who are jumping on board and following along with me. We're getting close to where we need to be. I need 500 in a year, and I'm at 140 in 3.5 months, or 139. I don't know what I'm at right now. I'd have to check. By the time this video comes out, I should have seen the Superman movie at least once, because I usually go to the Thursday preview shows with a friend of mine. So, and Superman is one that I really want to see, so even if he can't go for some reason, I'll probably go see it. And the reason I think the Superman movie is going to do well, because even my father wants to see it. And I'm not young anymore. My father is 24 years older than I am, and he wants to see Superman. And it comes out on his birthday, actually. Sorry, a little self-dox there. I apologize for that. But we can't go on his birthday because, you know, we still do cool little family things. We'll have cake, we'll order a pizza, we'll sing happy birthday. You know, the man deserves it. He was great to us all growing up, and, you know, it's his day, so we're going to give it to him. And then the next day is another family birthday, so we can't go that day. And then I think on the Sunday he wants to go golfing or something, because he still golfs, which I think is awesome. Keeps him moving, keeps him in shape. So Monday, for his birthday present, I bought us tickets to go see the IMAX at like 7 o'clock at night. And there's no way I could wait 4 days to see Superman. In fact, I'm debating spending the stupid $21 and buying a ticket to the Tuesday Amazon pre-sale show. I saw a headline for a review. I don't read the reviews because I don't want any spoilers for this one. And it said that the Superman movie's silly, like it was a bad thing. And from all the trailers, that's exactly what I thought it was going to be. It was going to be kind of Silver Age. It was going to be kind of 80s, and it was going to kind of be a silly version, like back the Justice League Europe and the Justice League America days from the 80s. So I was excited for it. So that review's not scaring me off. So hopefully in the next video, which will not be this video is coming out for Superman Day, but the one after it, which I believe is going to be Gojo or something else I'm working on. I haven't decided which one I'm going to put out first. I'll be here to tell you how awesome or terrible the Superman movie was, but I can't see it being bad. It just seems like it's the Superman movie that I want it to be. So if you see the Superman movie after watching this video, put in the comments what you thought about it, because I am going to put a comment about what I think of it when it gets time for that. So watching this one, I talked about how I draw big eyes earlier, and that I think I overdid it on Thor in this one, because I went back to my old school way at drawing giant eyes. I brought it back a little, and this is where I do it, even though I'm pretty much getting to the end of the colors. So as I said before, it's never too late to change something, as long as you finish it. So this one in particular, I didn't like the size of the eyes, so I shrunk them down in the middle of coloring it when I got to that part. So like I've said before, the only bad drawing is an unfinished drawing, and it's also never too late to change something. Although I will say I'm a little bit of a hypocrite on that one, because when I was finished with this one, I was like, damn, I should have made Superman's head a little smaller, because I didn't make his chest very broad, because I like my superheroes to have more realistic proportions, even though obviously they're big old muscle-bound fools like most superheroes. But, you know, if somebody's the size of your biggest bodybuilder, and they're a reporter for the local newspaper where Superman always shows up, it's kind of obvious who Superman is. So if he's just built more like a muscular, regular dude, which is another thing I like about the David Corner suite Superman, is he's not too big. He has he has idealized proportions, because, you know, the guy's a Hollywood actor, but, you know, it's also more of a down-to-earth physique. Henry Cavill was a great Superman. He was ripped. I don't think Corner Suite has that same look, and I think it fits pretty much most superheroes. Like, that's why I didn't have a problem with a Michael Keaton Superman, or, Batman, or things like that, because I don't think superheroes should look like oversized bodybuilders. That would hinder their movement, and they wouldn't be as effective. So I like Thor's original origin. Back 1963, he was unworthy. Odin sent him to Earth to learn humility, but he wasn't Thor. They sent him back, and he was, what was his name? Blake something. Donald Blake, sorry. I had to look that up quick, too, because I totally forgot. And he was sort of not worthy anymore. So they put the enchantment on the hammer. He who shall be worthy shall gain the powers of Thor. And so he was just this skinny doctor, Dr. Donald Blake, and to become Thor, he had a walking cane. He had to hit it to the ground and summon Thor, and then he would become Thor, the god of thunder. And it was pretty cool, because he was just like a weak, crippled doctor. He would hit the hammer, hit the walking cane on the ground, and the lightning strike, and he would become Thor. So that was pretty cool. They did away with that fairly quickly, but I like the little things that kind of gave Thor some humility and made him a little more down to earth. There was a Marvel DC crossover back in the 90s, I think it was. Justice League versus the Avengers or something like that. There's another one of those call-in things where you voted on certain fights. Some fights were done by the editors, like the Batman Captain America one. They came out with a solution where they both kind of fought themselves to a standstill, even though if you watch my Batman video, you know that I think Batman would have mopped the floor with Captain America. And Superman fought Thor, and Superman won, I believe. Maybe they had a standstill. I don't know. I'd have to look that up too, but I'm not going to. But also in those issues, there's a scene where where Superman, the fight's going, and the villain, I don't remember who that was either, because I haven't read this thing since it came out, but I do remember the iconic scene. I think Dan Jurgens drew it, one of the Superman artists of the time. And it's Superman standing there, his cape's torn off, his suit's all ripped up, but he's like pretty much the last man standing, and he picks up Thor's hammer and Captain America's shield, and he is mad and he's ready to go, and it's pretty much an iconic image if you want to look that up. But it also shows that at the time, Superman was worthy to hold Thor's hammer. I think part of the story was he was granted permission, I don't know. But, Superman, if Superman's not worthy to hold the powers of Thor, then who is? He's the most, wholesome character there is. And he also, there was a thing where Spider-Man couldn't hold the hammer, not because he wasn't worthy, but because, it's almost like a Viking rule. So Spider-Man wasn't willing to kill. So that's why he wasn't worthy to hold the hammer, because, he won't kill a foe in battle. Thor obviously will. He's a Viking warrior. He'll murder you where you stand if it'll save the day. And Superman, while he told the Joker in a recent story, while he generally doesn't like to kill people, he has no rule against it. It's just, most problems can be solved without, murdering your opponent. And when you're Superman, you're strong enough not to have that problem 99.9% of the time. And actually, that's a funny story. I read the whole thing, I think, or just the Joker part, where the Joker shows up in Metropolis and he's on a roof and he's getting ready to do some Joker thing. He says there's bombs throughout the city or something, and Superman is having none of it. He just shows up and he's like, "Listen, just go back to Gotham. I don't want to deal with your crap. I don't have time for your crap. There's too much stuff going on. So, get out of here, or I'm just gonna have to, whip your ass and take you home." So I think Superman quickly finds all the bombs, puts them out of commission. The Joker obviously doesn't think that's funny. And then he talks something to Superman. Superman's just, he's not having it. He basically says, "Listen, I'm not Bruce." Well, he doesn't say Bruce. "I'm not Batman. I don't have a no-kill rule. If you push me too far, I have no problems letting you die. It's just I generally don't kill people." And he's just really calm and really demeaning, and he scares the Joker, and the Joker pretty much like, "All right, I'm out of here while I still can," and he takes off. Although I have no idea why Superman just didn't bring him to the nearest insane asylum or jail for what he did, but that's comics. Logic is a little weird sometimes. There's no reason why the Joker should still be walking. In fact, this has nothing to do with Superman, but the Joker's first appearance is in Batman #1. And in his very first story, he dies. He gets stabbed and he dies. And the publishers realize that he's going to be really popular. So at the last minute, they changed it so like his body's missing when they go to pick him up. And he has another story in the same issue. That's the foresight they had about how popular they thought the Joker was going to be. So they killed him off in his first story. Before it was published, they changed the ending so that it was ambiguous if he was dead or not. And then he shows up again in the same issue. It's also the first appearance of Catwoman, by the way, Selena Kyle. I think they just call her the Cat or something in that one. She doesn't have a costume. She's just in a dress and on a boat, and I don't remember. I haven't read Batman #1 in a while. I have a famous first editions of it. It's a 70s magazine reprint. I have a couple of them. I have a Detective Comics 27, a Superman #1, and Action Comics 1, Wiz Comics #1, the first Justice Society, I forget, I think All-Star Comics something or another, and the Superman ones. So if you want an affordable way to read the first appearance of Superman, Batman, all those are like $10-15, and they're magazine size, and they're exact reprints of those comics. In fact, in the late 70s, early 80s, they have a cardboard cover, and underneath the cardboard cover, there's a regular comic book cover underneath it. And unscrupulous dealers would rip that cardboard cover off and try to sell these books as the originals, except they're magazine size, they're huge. Now, Golden Age comics are pretty big. They're bigger than your average comic. I don't remember by how much, but they're noticeably bigger if you hold one. And the early ones, like Action Comics and Superman 1 and Batman 1, the covers aren't all that shiny. They're more of a matte color, a matte finish, or like a satin finish. So that's one way you could tell. Like a friend of mine called me up once and he's like, "Hey, I think a friend of mine found a Wiz Comics #2 in their attic." That's the first appearance of Shazam. Although even though it says #2, it's actually #1. It's a whole thing. If we ever address Shazam, we'll talk about that. But he's like, "It looks old." I said, "How big is it?" He's like, "I don't know. I'll ask him." I said, "Put a piece of paper next to it. If it's a magazine size and much larger than a piece of paper, it's a reprint and it's not an original." And so he had the guy do that, and it was the famous first editions reprint, but they didn't want to believe me at first, so they had to do their own digging and looking it up. But turns out that's exactly what it was. So unfortunately, the guy didn't find a small fortune hiding in his attic, because it does happen. And actually, a couple years ago, I was really sad. Not a couple years ago, it was before the pandemic, so however long ago that was, time blurs for me because of that whole world-altering event. But I was at the flea market, and there was a guy there I've never seen before, and he just had a couple piles of comic books. And they were all Golden Age, but they were like weird titles I never heard of and didn't really have any value and nothing I was interested in, except for a couple issues of Shazam. So I bought those. They were like $20 each or $15 each. And I asked the guy, I said, "Is this all you have?" And he's like, "Oh, no, I had some Supermans. But I did another flea market yesterday, and some guy bought them all." I said, that's too bad. I said, just out of curiosity, what did you sell them for? It's like, I don't know. They were like in the early 20s. I think there were a couple in the teens, like the number wise Superman number, like 16, 17, 20, whatever. And it's like, I sold those for $20 a piece. Oh, my heart dropped. I wish I knew a flea market he was at the day before and I was there, because that would have been a hell of a score to get some early Golden Age Superman books. I think the earliest Superman comic I've ever had is like Superman number 50, or yeah, I think it was 51 or 50. One of those is a key issue where Batman and Superman learn each other's identity. I had the one before that, so whichever one that is. But it's still a cool cover, and it's still cool to have any Golden Age book. Like I think I mentioned the Batman book, the oldest Batman I had, I think was issue 23. That was fun. I got that at a local comic show. So if you ever luck into some old Golden Age books, whether it's Superman or Batman, or I think I had an Adventure Comics or something. I had the second appearance of, what's the guy's name? Some old, Icicle, the Icicle. He was a villain. Pick them up. They're really cool. I mean, the whole storytelling thing is completely different, and they feel different. They look different. It's just a whole, you could tell, they're basically from another era. And they're super cool. So, yeah, Golden Age comics are cool if you could find any. Sadly, they're not really cheap anymore, and you can't find affordable ones. But if you do, even if it's just a weird romance book, pick it up just to see what comics used to be compared to what they are today. Like when I was growing up in the 80s and buying comics in the 80s and 90s, they would have miniseries. Limited series, they called them, or miniseries, and they would usually be 4 to 6 issues. One of my favorite one was the Machine Man limited series. Barry Windsor Smith did the art, and the storytelling in those is very streamlined and right to the point. In the first issue, they tell you that Machine Man's been decommissioned and forgotten about. For some reason, the case his parts was in got thrown away from the warehouse because it wasn't marked, because it happens in the future of like 2025, which I think happened earlier, 2021. But back then it seemed like it was a million years away. And so some scrappers find them, put them together, and bring them back. They establish exactly who the villain was, which was one of his old villains from back in the day, and what her motivations were. And by the end of the first issue, the story was rolling and ready to go. And they wrapped the whole thing up in 4 issues, and they told a full story. And it was great. If they told that story now, it would be a 1.5 year long event, and he wouldn't be found and recommissioned and put back together until probably the 6 months into the run. I blame mostly Michael Bendis on that, because I remember he did a Avengers run in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, early 2010s, I don't remember. But I was excited for it because I think Daredevil was supposed to be in it, but that was spoiled and they changed the whole thing. And Wolverine was in it, and the Sentry was in it, and it had a cool lineup, and I really wanted to read it. And I started picking it up monthly, and it's on like issue 6 or 7, and they haven't gotten the team together yet. Nothing's happened. It's just a random building the team for like 6 issues, and they haven't established a villain yet, what they're looking for, what the problem is. It's just, it was slow. I thought it was boring. The only cool thing that happened in it is that's the run where the Sentry, he's in the Supermax prison, the one, in the middle of the ocean, and they go to get him out because they need somebody that powerful for whatever the big bad is, who they haven't even established yet. And something happens, and Carnage is there too, and the Sentry just grabs him, flies up into space, and rips Carnage in half. And it was supposed to be the symbolic thing, about the 90s comics and how awful they were and how cool the new modern comics are. And, eventually, something happened. Carnage, the symbiote, kept him alive, and he got robot legs or something, and a satellite picked him up, but that all came way later. And yeah, it just put me off to that whole run. After like issue 6 or 7, I just stopped buying it just because it was so repetitive and so boring. In fact, he wrote Daredevil for a while, and turned me off to Daredevil for a while because it was so slow. But anyway, getting back to this, as you can see, I'm doing the rosy cheek thing to Superman. They make him look a little more fleshed out and more, human, real. Even though I'm drawing in a cartoony style, you still want to flesh out the colors and the characters to make them look like they might really exist. And in fact, we're almost done with this one. We're putting the texture on the background. We got my signature up in the corner that we're going to move down. I add a few lines to the sky to make it a little more interesting and tone down the texture a little. In fact, I need to get another texture supply. The ones I have are cool, but they're a little too rough in some cases. So I think after Superman, I got another video ready to go. That's Gojo. I already said that. But then the week before the Fantastic Four, 2 weeks, I don't really have anything to upload. And I was thinking of doing something a little more horror related, but I like the Universal monsters. And I started a Frankenstein versus Frankenberry, a fun little ridiculous mashup. But I think I might actually go with The Bride. So all you horror fans, it'll be something to look forward to. And yeah, this is pretty much done. I just darken the hammer a little bit and call it a day. So once again, I thank you all for coming along for the draw. Hit the like, subscribe, and all those other buttons you're supposed to hit. Give me a follow if you haven't already. Enjoy your week, and go draw something.